I ain't searching, I remember. I was born with the answer. Through the fire, through the pressure, I emerge with the standard. I don't follow, I awaken. Ain't no man I'm the root, I'm the branches. I'm the law and the language. Yeah.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome back to another round of My Patriot Report Live. I am the bridge connecting the next generation to federal contracting. I am Ratwan Hill. And with me, I have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Ambassador of Peace. And if you don't know who he is by now, you might want to ask Google Gemini, Mr. Walter Cotton III. Mr. Cotton, man, happy Friday. How are you doing?
You know, I'm doing very well today. I was able to keep my word to myself, and I got up at dark 30 and got the blood moving in a workout, and so I'm feeling energized today.
Yes, sir. I'm glad to hear that. Now, with all this energy, I wanted to, focus on the veterans, right? We got this one big glaring bill, the Take Care of America's Veterans Act, and from my understanding, it's a lot of uproar in the community, and there seems to be a split, which I guess I'm having a challenge in understanding why there's a split, because to my understanding, they're taking away from some of the most common disabilities that veterans have, and they're taking that money to be basically reallocated towards other benefits that we have now. What does that mean exactly? Now, what are we looking at? Are we looking at an intentional divide, or are we just looking at veterans not being at the table initially participating, and now we're just being reactive?
You know, I think that we're looking at something that's systemic here, that is coming above the surface, and we're starting to see it because it's coming to the surface. And that is a certain tone deafness that we have with our Congress as it relates to them developing laws, bills, and regulations that really support the people. And so in this particular instance, because of the nature and the climate of the political environment that we're in, our political leaders are demonstrating a certain type of hubris in terms of what they can do with policies and procedures, and they get to subjectively decide what's in the best interest of the constituents. So like in this particular situation, it's my understanding that a group of political leaders got together and decided to create a bill that would satisfy multiple interests of the veteran community. And so they looked at some 60 bills that had been introduced in different sessions of Congress, and for whatever reason, never made it to the floor for a vote, that provided value for the veteran community. And they said, well, we'll cherry pick that population, of the potentially hundreds of bills that didn't make it, and we select which ones will provide utility and value for the veterans. Well, that's where the mistake came in. The mistake came in the silo, where they went into a silo and made these decisions without including the voice of the veteran community. And as a result, the priorities that the veteran community would have promoted were not included. And there were some considerations in terms of how they were going to pay for this stuff that disenfranchised other members of the veterans community, which they would have found out in consultation if they had brought us in. So the way this particular bill came together both indicated the systemic problem that we have in our political system and the need for the stakeholders, right? The veterans in this particular situation to get more invasively involved in the political process.
Now, what just came to my mind, you've been advocating for veterans for 20 plus years. So when you say systemic, we've been having a lot of these issues since probably before I was born. Have you seen a gradual? Would you say that we're at a gradual pace of improvement within the veteran community, or do you think it's just certain lanes like entrepreneurship, where you, Mr. Bill Elmore, and other gentlemen, other disabled veterans have been driving those initiatives? Do you think that we're improving from a holistic standpoint, or do you think it's just certain lanes that are increasing and being improved?
I believe that there are selective areas that have opportunities for improvement right now, where there needs to be a systemic improvement across the board. And what I mean by that, as an example, our veterans. Wow, I lost my train of thought, and I really got to catch that back, because I got to stop doing that. I got to get me some ginkgo biloba or something to stop doing that. But the question. Remind me of the question.
Yes, sir. I said, do you see a gradual improvement through the whole veteran population, or is it just within certain lanes in the veteran ecosystem?
Here's where I believe my mind was trying to take me. And it was trying to take me to the understanding that in the early days of Public Law 10650, right, when it was novel for veterapreneurs to enter the federal contracting arena, there was value inflow and a lot of positive energy focused towards the veterapreneur community in need. And as a result of that, the veteran community was active. As a matter of fact, they were so active, it attracted me to the advocacy season that I spent. But as that law matured, as veterans' ability to interface with the contracting process became more proficient, value flowed out of the disabled veteran status. And as that value flowed out of it, right, new entrants came online, and new directions for utilizing veterans occurred. So you had value inflow, and you reached that critical inflection point, right, where Andy Grove says you either reinvent yourself or you risk obsolescence. Well, we had a reinvention in the veteran community, right? They increased the percentage of contracting with veterans from 3% to 5%, ostensibly dipping that community in the fountain of youth and creating a new amount of value for that community. Well, what didn't happen was those veterans that made their money during the early season, right, weren't energized to be engaged. And the new veterans that are coming into the space, they are at the mercy of the existing system today that don't have the advocacy lanes. They don't have the VSOs out there with the kind of configuration that we had in the past. So now we're at a place where the veteran service organization community has to reinvent itself, or we're going to risk additional actions like the telegraph that we're seeing from the Protect Our Veterans Act, right? This just the beginning of them ignoring a veteran community that's not actively engaged in the political process, and demonstrating to them where their authority and power derives from, which is we the people, the governed.
Absolutely. Now, and that's the exact reason why you started this Capital Matters movement, essentially, because of that exact problem, that essentially that the veterans, or not even just veterans, but the civilians, we're not as engaged with the political process. But looking at the veteran population, we see that when our voices come together, it stops things in motion. And the last thing I heard about the Take Care American Veterans Act, that it was on the House floor, but it's paused because it was an uproar within the veteran community.
Right, because there was an uproar in the disabled veteran community, and the Disabled Veterans of America, showed up and showed out. And so the reason I started the Capital Matters movement is because our politics right now are out of control. And the traditional pathway to influencing our political process and producing outcomes has been hijacked, right? It's been hijacked by corporations and political action committees. And so we have a selection process that's being driven by oligarchs. It's being driven by people with the capital. You know, fortunately, we live in a constitutional republic and we have the ability to remedy that, and we will remedy that over time. But in the interim, we need to get our hands on the reins of our politicians. And the way that we do that is by breaking ranks, right? By getting out of line with the way things are done traditionally. And so we're in the Capital Matters movement suggesting that we don't wait until November or the midterms or whenever the election day occurs. We don't wait till then to influence the process, right? We start influencing the process from within at the planning stage, right? When they're planning laws and regulations, right? We want to be at the table. We want to be in the rooms. And if we can put ourselves in those rooms, the outcomes that show up in the form of bills like the Protect Our Veterans Act more closely represent the interest of us as constituents. And so that's why I'm taking, again, this model that my good friend Justin has produced in DC, the Hill Vets model, right? Where for the past 15 years, we've been putting veterans as staff in those offices. It produced value when we had the problem with Kingdomware, right? We were able to go and sit down with our congressional leaders and get them to participate in our advocacy briefs and the like. When we had problems with parity in contracting, and a lot of people don't know these battles that were fought over the years, right? A lot of the blood, but there was an issue where parity in contracting was a challenge. And the parity question was, well, we've got all of these preference categories, right? We got women owned, we got minority or small disadvantaged business, right? We got hub zone, and now we got this new entrance of service disabled veteran, right? If I got money to spend, who should I spend it with first? So the question in the agencies was a priority perspective, parity in contracting. We fought that battle and came up with a solution that was equitable for all preference categories. There are many other skirmishes that we fought at the political level because we were in the rooms, right? The battle over succession. What happens to our veteran-owned businesses when they graduate to other than small business? That was a hard problem that we were wrestling with. What was the solution? Affiliation exemption and mentor protege, right? Where they could both dip themselves in the fountain of youth and mentor other veterans that are coming along so that the government could have continuity of service, continuity of quality of service. So we in the veteran community have long proactively participated in the process. And as we got fat and happy with our success, I'll be honest with you, because I was one of them. I was on a world cruise, right? With my client Zero, right? We're on the Viking Sky. I'm on my way to Sydney, Australia. I'm living the good life, right? When I got the call that we have to come back because the proverbial crap has hit the fan. And if we don't do something, we're going to find ourselves in a hurt locker. Well, welcome to Hurt Locker 101. And now we've got to come together as a community. And I'm talking about starting with our patriots, right? Our true patriots. And we've got to recapture control of the economic foundation, the economic rack and pinion steering in this country. And we're going to do that one contract at a time. And I'm going to put the big talking stick down because I may let the cat out of the bag.
Yes, sir. And this is exactly why we're rebuilding the elite SDVOB network. You know, we need veterans, we need partners, we need supporters and contributors. If you believe veterans should not just be helped, but positioned to own a lead, you need to join the Elite Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Network or contribute to the mission by scanning that barcode.
And you've got people, I mean, I want to add on to this, you know, you've got people like myself, right, who are making the yeoman investment in creating the foundation for making this happen, right? And so I would welcome as much support as I can from my veteran brethren. And I'm not just looking for your money. I need your intellectual property, right? I need your engagement. So please join me in this movement as we make America safe again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, I wanted to segue and talk about, get deeper into reunification and what this means for veterans, right? So we see the TAP, before I get to that, we see the TAP program. We have the Contract Our Veterans Act, the Veteran Member Business Loan Act. None of these components was actually considered in regards to self-employment, entrepreneurship. None of that language was included in this bill. Now, is that also part of the systemic of just pushing veterans into the workforce because they need because we're good workers naturally, just because how we are trained? What are your
I'm puzzled by this one myself, because as you and the majority of the audience knows, my buddy Bill Elmore, right, who is the father of Public Law 10650, or the 3% goal law, has been advocating for the better part of the past 20 years to get veterans included in contracting, just like service disabled veterans are included. And for the past 2 years, Congress has promised us that they were going to pass that law. They made an attempt 2 years ago, and the Senate got distracted and it didn't happen. Last year, Congressman Van Orden actually used the forcing function as the chairman of the Veteran Small Business Committee to get that on the House side of the National Defense Authorization Act, and the Senate didn't take it up, and they said, oops, mea culpa, we made a mistake again. For us to be sitting in a situation where they pull together this omnibus bill with a $21 billion price tag associated with it, and them not include the Contract Our Veterans Act or the Veteran Member Business Loan Act, the entrepreneurial component, is an indication of their veteranpreneur tone deafness. And this is where we as veterans have to take control of the process, right? Because what we own is the advantage of settled law, right? So we don't really need Congress's permission to do the things that we about to do, wink, wink. But it would be wonderful if we could have a collaborative effort with our politicians and our industries and our citizens working together to produce solutions that actually create economic rising tides. Not rising tides that help the few, but rising tides that help the many.
Now, okay, this is my question. You always teach us, you taught me to think without, there's no limits, there's no boundaries, think without a box. Now, what would change if the veteran TAP program, the transition assistance program, included business ownership, contracting, and capital access? Like, what if they included, or let me reword that question. Is that something that we could do where we create that in that TAP program, a package where the VNRE self-employment track is more robust and more easily accessible in a pathway? Is that something that we could develop? Because if small businesses is the backbones of this nation, small businesses supply most of the middle class, or they employ most of the middle class, I would think that should be a priority for not only the military, but for the nation. Is that something that we have the
You would think that way, right? You would think that way, right? But the leading political action committee doesn't think that way, right? The leading political action committee wants to, seduce you into thinking the continued investment in, say, data centers, right? And the dollars necessary to support an AI bubble expansion that doesn't have a realistic ROI is where you should be focusing your time and attention, right? And so this is a season where our true patriots, right, him and her who bore the battle, need to recognize that we've had a change in the theater, which creates a point in time opportunity for us to change the game. And the game that we're changing is the golden rule game, right? The control or access to the resources. And that's what we have the limited opportunity to take ownership of. That's what we're teaching our veterans to do. And I've been so effective at doing that teaching that I've got Mr. Hill emboldened with the belief that he can change whole communities with this concept of regentrification. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the, big, hairy bulb, audacious strategy that you have for revitalizing communities like the ones that you and I came from.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, let's talk about it. We see the opportunity to, revitalize the communities we came from. We understand that because we have settled law that's in our favor, that we could essentially run the board on government contract. I'm gonna call it what it is, because we have this golden ticket and we have this strategy that allows us to.
And we talk in these lofty terms often of superpower and golden ticket and the like. But I think that the community would benefit by having a scenario, the vision of a scenario. So if you were looking at one of these underserved communities that has the unique geographic makeup that we talk about, right? It's got a good, strong opportunity zone footprint. It's got a good, strong hub zone footprint. And, it's an underserved community. Let's say it's the neighborhood that you grew up in or the neighborhood I grew up in, right? How would your revitalization strategy, how would it work in a community like that?
Well, I think it could start from different ways. So you have the ability to, domicile a federal contract into that opportunity zone. You have the ability to, because of the Defense Production Act, and the ability to create manufacturing plants and creating a manufacturer plant that supports the government needs, like drones or like energy or something in those lines, is mutually beneficial, because it's a government need, and also you're providing jobs to your community. And since it's a government need, it's not a business that has a fad or a trend. It's less likely to go out of business. You create more stable employment.
Can I unpack those two areas? Because I think that what you started with was, the root cause of what causes most minority economic enhancing strategies to fail. And that is that they don't have the engine. They don't have the enabler, right? They don't have the economic enabler that allows them to control, right? They don't have the ability to control. And so what I heard you say, and you just slipped it off of your tongue, like everybody can do it, is that as a contractor, you can capture a contract and you can domicile it in the opportunity zone or in the community that you're targeting. Is that accurate?
Yes.
That is a powerful understanding that the audience needs to hear. And so what you're saying is that you see the ability to take assets that are available through the federal government's procurement process, whether it be existing federal contracts or contracts that could be put in place through the Defense Production Act, right? Where you're partnering with the government to reshore a manufacturing plant, if you will. And you can take that government contracting component and that manufacturing piece and use that as an economic development foundation in a community. And your position is, if you can get like-minded individuals, you can have a cluster of those businesses, thus producing the rising tide in those communities. Is that an accurate dissertation of what you're suggesting?
Absolutely. And since those type of communities or underserved communities are all over the United States, everybody has the ability to essentially do what you say, use that cookie cutter blueprint and do it for every community and insulate those communities.
And so the core enabler that you're talking about are federal contracts, and the average layman sees the federal contracting arena as a tall hill to climb, right? They see it as a very complex value proposition, right? What emboldens you to think that you can navigate that very tough and difficult rapids and acquire contracts? Like, what makes you think that you can win a contract?
Well, fortunately for me, I get to sit at the footstool and have a mentor like Mr. Walter Kyle, who is responsible for over 150 billion. So, as the audience, you can imagine if somebody with that type of pedigree already have the systems, it make it easier to understand, and not only understand, but when he points your attention to the regulations and laws, and what he always say, study yourself approved. And once you read the laws and understand that, oh, wait a minute, this does say that I have this advantage. The rule of two does say if two contractors that are similarly situated and could answer the requirements, they shall set that contract aside to them. Because my understanding of that, it emboldens me to say, why not? And not only that, the fact that we, executed that at this point in time, it emboldens me further to say, yeah, we can do it.
And that sounded exciting. It was, very theoretical. I want to give the audience a practical example, right? And so we've talked about them utilizing their ability to capture contracts in a non-competitive fashion as disabled veterans, and then domicile them in this geographic area that you've described, right? We've talked about them utilizing the Defense Production Act, right, to get the government to be a part of the capital stack that would be used to domicile a manufacturing facility in one of those areas. And I know that you have a conversation going with one of your partners that's a multi-billion-dollar multinational company that does medical equipment manufacturing, right? They do they have an energy division, right? And they are in talks with you about potentially domiciling one of their medical manufacturing assets in the community that you're talking about. Let's talk a little bit more about how you would use the Defense Production Act to take the interest of that multinational company's healthcare manufacturing and domicile it in your opportunity zone or the community of interest. Absolutely. How would you do that?
Absolutely. Well, because we have the Defense Production Act and we have a need from the government and we have an organization that can do it, and it's with the VA and DOD when you talk about medical equipment.
Let's stop for a second. Because you throw that Defense Production Act off your tongue as if the audience knows what that is. So let's talk a little bit more granularly about the attributes of the Defense Production Act. And let's use the example of that $700 million that the president recently invested in revitalizing coal manufacturing in the nation. So that's an example of how the Defense Production Act can become a layer of the capital stack that a community would use to revitalize a sector in their community. And so what you're saying is that you can use that Defense Production Act in concert with your multinational organization's interest to create manufacturing here. You take the rest of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, sir. Exactly that. Us being able to use those funds as a capital stack to build out that manufacturing. In this example, this instance is building out medical equipment. Now, if you're a disabled veteran, DOD, VA has 99% of all the hospitals, right? You're a veteran. You have an advantage with those military-facing agencies, and of course, the VA is veteran. Public Law 109, 461, Vets First program. So because you have those competitive advantages, you have the money right here, and you have the asset right here. When you connect all of that together, now you have the you now have all the ingredients to make that manufacturing facility come true.
You speak like one with a tremendous amount of past performance, a tremendous amount of capability and capacity. And I want to make sure that the audience understands that the thing that emboldens you to speak with this full and deep-throated voice on these matters is the fact that you know that everything that you're talking about is covered by settled law. You know that what you're talking about is not something that you have to ask people permission for. You know that the laws of this land empower you with the ability to compel these organizations that you're talking to adhere to your demands. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, yes, that is. Yes, that is. And I know, and I understand just with my interface in the industry that may be bold language for the regular, I won't say regular, but for industry standards or how the paradigm they usually operate from. But when you got a lane and you got receipts, you can't deny that,
No, you can't deny that. And I don't know how wide you want to open your kimono on this, but I know that you are driving a fourth quarter solution for the contracting officers who are sitting around with the hard problem of having not enough year left, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a whole bunch of money in their budget, or a program manager who doesn't want their requirement to go into consolidation. And you've come up with a solution that they can use at this 12th hour. And I like to call it a stem cell. You call it a universal adapter. But let's talk to the 1102s out there that are wrestling with the fourth quarter hard problem. How can you help them?
Absolutely. So yes, we saw the tea leaves. We understand DEI being dismantled. We saw how all the other socioeconomic statuses were being attacked, and we knew that it was going to give the contracting officers a very hard, a more challenging season. And so we were proactive in creating, our scalable solution that allows us to be able to answer any requirement that a contracting officer has, because we can dynamically engineer that solution at the point of need. But we were proactive in creating a big enough team that what we coin as bringing brownies to the contracting officer. So so on August 1st, we decided that we would have a SDVOSB powwow, fourth quarter acquisition solution for the 1102 community, so we could bring all you guys that have facing that challenge with the fourth quarter, more dollars than you have year left. And we wanted to welcome you guys into this solution where we could give you guys the solution, the blueprint, and a pathway that allows you to meet your goals and allow you to sleep easier at night.
So if I'm an 1102, right, and I've got a 8A requirement that, fell off of its moorings, and I've got to find a home for that, let's say it's a 20 or $30 million requirement, and I don't have a whole bunch of fiscal year left. So I don't have time to go through the market research and the solicitation process in order to find a existing preference program, right? Because that's what the FAR rewrite requires. I can take it out of the 8A program, but I've got to put it with an existing preference program. So what I'm hearing you say is that you have a solution that would allow that contracting officer to bring that requirement to you, and you can dynamically engineer an exact fit for that requirement in a service-disabled veteran uniform, a service-disabled veteran envelope that they could award against within a 90-day, within a 30-day, within 100. How quickly could they award against this configuration you're imagining?
Well, we're ready to go right now. So as fast as they pen the sign.
So just to let the cat a little bit out of the bag here for the contracting officers that think we're spewing hyperbole. What Mr. Hill is talking about is utilizing a simple acquisition strategy under the GSA schedule to help you out with this hard problem. If you need more information about that, Mr. Hill's email address is passing across the bottom. And in Monday's Patriot Report, we will give you details on the date and time of the service disabled veteran powwow.
Absolutely. And guys, on that note, have a great weekend and try to stay cool. I am Ratwan Hill, and that is the Mr. Walter Cotton III. We'll catch y'all next week.